Hi there, I'm Savannah Mexto with Manor Law Group, and I'm excited to welcome you to another Webinar Wednesday with esteemed elder law and estate planning attorney, Robert Manor. On today's Webinar Wednesday, Bob will be talking about elder law, and we'll be answering a question you may have even asked yourself. What is elder law anyway? Now, before I pass the torch to Bob, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. First, a quick disclaimer, and Bob will cover more on this later. Today's webinar will be educational, informative. You're definitely going to learn something, but you're not going to receive specific legal advice. I encourage you, if you are looking for unique legal advice for your situation, to contact us after the webinar. Also note that today's webinar is recorded. We will send out a replay link tomorrow so that you can actually rewatch it or share with family and friends. If you have questions during today's webinar, I encourage you to use the chat box. We will save time after the webinar to review those questions, and if for some reason we aren't able to get to your question, we will contact you after the webinar. Now, why should you listen to what the folks at Manor Law Group have to say? First, you should note that all three of our attorneys are accredited by the Veterans Administration to assist veterans with claims and appeals. Attorney Bob Manor is nationally board certified as an elder law attorney by the National Elder Law Foundation. He's one of only 19 attorneys in Michigan to achieve this designation. He's currently on the executive board of the State Bar of Michigan Elder Law and Disability Rights Section and past president of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, Michigan chapter. Also, Manor Law Group has been honored by readers of our local paper as the best or favorite law firm for the last 8 years in a row. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Attorney Bob Manor.
Hi, folks. So this is always an interesting topic as far as what is elder law. So I'm going to get right into it. So elder law has actually been a field of practice that hasn't been around for that long, as opposed to most areas of law that have been around for hundreds of years, obviously. And so elder law really came about as being a field of practice probably around 30 years ago. And it's a bit unfortunate that they settled on that term, elder law, because nobody really likes that word elder too much. And so you do have to be elderly in order for us to help you? And the answer is, of course, not. So what is elder law? How is it different than estate planning? What kind of constitutes somebody that focuses their practice on elder law? What does it include? What does it not include? So one of the things that we'll often talk about with elder law, of course, it incorporates everything that is considered estate planning, wills and trusts and powers of attorney and advance directives and all those types of things. But there's typically used as a distinction between estate planning and elder law in that in addition to those things, we focus on a little bit of a broader picture. So what that means is the phrase I often will use is people frequently will go to their attorney for estate planning to talk about what happens when I die, right? And yet I often am going to be talking to them mostly about what happens if you don't die. And what I mean by that is elder law encompasses the life planning, meaning what happens for the rest of your life. People kind of assume that that's not something that they need legal planning for. And in reality, it's probably more important, if you really thought about it, it's more important than what happens after you die. Of course, we want to make sure we've made it as easy as possible for our family and that we've made things that minimize taxes and made sure that things ideally stay out of court and that things are handled fairly efficiently. Those are all very important after our death, but just as important, and I think most people would probably agree with me, is what about making sure that you have the ability to stay in charge, that you have the ability to be in control, that you make your own decisions for the rest of your life, that you have a plan in place if you get sick. You have a plan in place and you've got mechanisms in place, you've got people in place, you've got the legal documents in place for the rest of your life, including what if you don't die, meaning you get sick, meaning you get old. and we all are gonna, well, hopefully we all get old. We're all gonna die. Not all of us are gonna get old, but you don't have to wait till you're old to plan for that. In fact, most of us will think about planning for different stages in our life, right? We're gonna often plan for when we get out of school, plan for when we get our first job, or plan for marriage, plan for kids, certainly plan for retirement. A lot of people will plan for retirement for a good period of time. You know, sometimes 10 years, they'll say, well, I'm thinking about maybe retiring in 10 years. I better get my things in order, get my finances in order, get my estate planning in order. But what people often fail to do is they fail to plan for a stage in life that most of us are going to face. And that stage in life that most of us are going to face are where we're going to be somewhat dependent on someone else for some period of time. The reality is there's three possible options there, right? The three possible options are you die young and you never have that stage of life, that you are one of the incredibly lucky people that live a long, healthy life to the day that you die peacefully in your sleep and never have any issue where you're dependent on somebody else. But the vast majority of us, we're going to have some period of time where we're dependent on someone else for our daily activities, for possibly helping us with our finances, balancing our checkbook, paying our bills, maybe even making decisions for us. Now, none of us like to think about this, right? This is not the most comfortable topic people have, but the reality is most of us are going to have this period of time. And for some of us, it could just be a few days. But for many of us, it's going to be several years. And if it's several years, do you have things in place? So people say, oh, I'll just put my kids' names on it. Well, that's going to cause its own set of problems. That's not going to be sufficient. So what we talk about with elder law is life planning, making sure we have those things in place. Also sort of included as a portion of elder law, and often we do phrase it differently. So for example, our section of the Lawyer Association is called Elder Law and Disability Rights. So it's for anyone facing physical or cognitive difficulties that could cause them to need some additional planning, additional protections of their assets, qualifying for different government programs. And so you could be 2 years old and need planning for that, 18 years old and need planning for that, or 105 years old and need planning for that. And so the idea, one of the big parts of elder law that's different than estate planning, is we're planning for that stage, whatever time that comes, or even if it's temporary. You know, we've had lots of times where somebody had a stroke, for example, and they got better. But during that period of time where they're recovering from the stroke, it was really important that we had these things in place. And I have lots of disaster stories of not having the proper legal documents in place, not having the proper planning in place. And so elder law tends to focus more on the person and what their needs are, as opposed to documents. Sometimes people kind of focus on estate planning as being document based. Oh, I need a will. Oh, I need a trust. Well, even estate planning really shouldn't be just about those documents. But elder law tends to look a little bit bigger than that, to say, well, it's not, I don't care if you have a will or a trust. You know, that's not as important, because, you know, a trust is often going to be helpful in life planning and in planning for for living, and planning for keeping control, planning for you to be in charge as long as possible, planning for you making sure who would be able to help you if you ever need help. That's often going to be part of that, but that's not really contemplated by a lot of estate planning. A lot of estate planning just kind of puts a person in place and says, well, I'm going to have my son have some authority in the event that I can't do it. But there's no instructions, there's no details, there's no advocacy. And so a lot of elder law is really about life advocacy, health advocacy, care advocacy, and of course, making sure that we don't lose all our money to the cost of care. So there's kind of a trajectory of things. So many folks, you know, you're familiar with estate planning. When we start getting over to the elder law, there is, for example, the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. Well, that's been around, I think, boy, it's probably close to 35 years now since that was founded. And that was the people that founded the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys it's interesting to hear the story because it was a group of young, attorneys that were mostly, many of them came from social work backgrounds, many of them came from public interest backgrounds, and they realized that there was this need that was becoming, generating, that wasn't being addressed by the law schools, wasn't being addressed by lawyers in general, wasn't being addressed by the legal documents that people were creating, as far as how do we make sure that people be able to maintain the best quality of life for the remainder of their life, however long that is, that they be able to maintain as much control as possible for the remainder of their life, however long that is, that they be able to stay out of the court system, stay out of institutional systems, have it about the making sure people are able to get the best life they can for whatever life they have remaining. And that's what elder law is really about. So this group got together and founded the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, and that's kind of where they started using this word elder law. I think there was some debate about it, and that's what they settled on, and so that's what we're stuck with, kind of a thing. But and then after several years, they decided, well, it's kind of important to have some distinction, because anybody can kind of throw elder law on their business card, right? And so I will see this frequently, and I'm not complaining about it, but there's lots of attorneys that will just kind of throw elder law on there as an additional thing that they do, right? They do drunk driving, they do, bankruptcy, they do real estate, they do criminal law, they do, business law, and they throw on elder law as a thing. And so, that's why people get confused a little bit about what elder law is, because well, how is that different than estate planning? They say elder law because it's a more popular term, seems to be lately, but the idea is, how can you, the organization of people that kind of created this said, well, how can we make sure that there's some folks out there that we can kind of count on, that they've done their, they've paid their dues, they've done their due diligence, they've done the work, they know what they're doing, we've tested them, we've peer reviewed them, and that's where this National Elder Law Foundation came. So you've heard of doctors being board certified. Well, this is a board certification for elder law attorneys. And so they came up with this thing called a certified elder law attorney. Now, other groups have used various things like elder law certificate. Even the state of Michigan has this elder law certificate. There's different things, but it's not board certification. What is the National Elder Law Foundation's board certification? Well, it's actually kind of a fairly complicated process, to the extent that there's really not that many. I think last I checked, there's maybe 600 attorneys who have qualified for this throughout the country. And we have to take another bar exam, just like lawyers have to take this bar exam to become a lawyer. The certified elder law attorneys had to take another bar exam specifically related to these issues, that deals with the multitude of different types of law that we have to know and have some expertise in order to practice elder law efficiently and thoroughly. In addition to the exam, we have to be peer reviewed. We have to have other attorneys in the practice area say, yes, I've worked with this person and they know what they're doing. Then we have to show, I think initially we had to show about 60 different cases that we could have evaluated that say we've worked on these 60 different cases, everywhere from housing to asset protection, to Medicaid, to nursing home, to end of life issues, elder abuse, all of these things, tax issues. There's some tax things that we had to show that we've had cases on that. And so we had then this board look at our peer review that other lawyers have vouched for us, our results on the exam, which is notoriously difficult, at least based on the statistics of how many people pass. And I think in some years it's been down to like 20% of the people that took it passed. I think it rarely gets over about 50% of the people that take the day-long exam pass it. And so they do the peer review, the test, and then a evaluation of the cases that you've worked on. And if you pass that, then you get to be a certified elder law attorney. So in Michigan, there's, I think, 19. I'm going to be helping a couple of attorneys. I proctor the test for them. So We were going to proctor that in May, and everything kind of shut down in May, so that was pushed off to, I think, September. I'll be proctoring the exam for 2 attorneys that would like to be added to that group of board certified elder law attorneys. And then even beyond that, now there is a group of elder law attorneys that have come together as part of what we call the Life Care Planning Law Firm Association. And that goes even a further step to say, okay, it's not just about the legal issues that people are facing in this time period. It's also about care and getting good care. It's not just about protecting the money. It's about making sure that we get good care. So that is where the slogan is to find, get, and pay for good quality long-term care. So find, meaning that will often help folks determine where in the maze of different options, whether it's home care or independent living or assisted living or memory care or nursing home or and what type of caregivers that we need, those types of things. So find, get, meaning advocacy on that care. So we have a nurse on staff, for example, and it seems odd for folks that we have a nurse on staff at a law firm while our nurse provides advocacy. So she'll often go in, she'll go to care meetings, she'll provide for, she'll help folks figure out and translate what the doctor's saying sometimes. Sometimes we have to advocate with the caregiver agency or the caregiver company and say, well, we don't feel like we're getting good enough care, or we need to make sure that this person is checked on more. And it's something that, can you do it yourself? Of course, but having somebody as a nurse that has a lawyer standing behind them, often we can get things to happen that other people can't, that families can't. Even really talented and articulate families that are fighting for making sure their mom is being well cared for, that it's very difficult to maneuver the maze that's created by some of the healthcare insurances and some of the legal rules and things like that. And so it is something that is surprisingly important and frequent, that families need our assistance in just getting good care and advocating for good care. And it's not to say that the organizations that out there aren't trying and doing their best, but they have to maneuver the rules too. And there's all kinds of regulations that we have to get through. And so we consider ourselves a partner often with these with the caregivers, in that, if there's a bad caregiver, great, we got to get rid of them or get them out of at least our clients' care situation. But if they're doing their best and they're just trying to deal with all of the government regulation, all the rules and things like that, we can help them. Sometimes we're able to spend more time with the family and figure out. I'll give you a quick example of a perfect example of life care planning. We had a gentleman, and this happens sometimes, where he was, because of his disease, he had a certain type of dementia, and he had hallucinations, and sometimes would get aggressive. And honestly, I'm not sure that he was intending to be angry or aggressive or hurt anybody, but his mind was playing tricks on him sometimes. And he, one of the things that we perceived as aggressive, so he was actually in my office, and I had my one of the elder care coordinators sitting with him as I was talking to his wife, and he kept getting up and like leaning in towards her, and she was a little scared. And so as soon as he would do that, she would kind of get up. And so what we realized later is it looked like he was being aggressive towards her. In fact, he was modeling her behavior. He was seeing, his mind wasn't quite putting all the things together. He couldn't quite figure out what was going on there. But when she stood up, it felt like he was supposed to stand up. So I think she was leaning in to be able to talk to him. So in the same room, I could talk to his wife and not be distracted by it. So she'd lean in. He'd lean in thinking that she was getting up and that it was a cue for him to get up. And it looked like he was actually coming towards her and being aggressive towards her. That, and that happens sometimes. And so, and there were times where he was in fact aggressive. And so that's very difficult. So what do sometimes caregiver organizations have to do, or even hospitals? They will medicate somebody like that to the point that they're almost not existent. They're almost a zombie. And so we always try to fight against that if there's any way around it. And in this case, for example, the way we found around it is we had our people were able to spend enough time with the family to figure out some cues and to figure out some triggers. And one of the things that they had learned after spending some time with the family, this is folks from my office had learned, was that for whatever reason, old cowboy movies would always calm him down. If you put on an old cowboy movie, he would sit down and watch it. He'd get relaxed. He would, it was always calming for this gentleman. And so we were able to, once we found him a place that was able to care for him, they said, boy, we don't know how to deal with this guy. We think we're gonna have to, put him on these drugs that's gonna just make him so tired all the time he's barely gonna move. And so we advocated against that. And then we realized, oh, we could train the caregivers to put in a cowboy movie. And it made a huge difference for this family's life. They were still able to have their dad. They were still able to have their husband for the last period of his life. And he was around for another year or two. And they were able to have their dad rather than have him be drugged into being a zombie. And so that's a difference of what sort of life care planning lawyers do, and that's why we have a nurse on staff. And so that's a kind of a long example, but that's kind of the difference between what an estate planning lawyer would do. It's funny because other lawyers sometimes can't really see that distinction. They have this idea of what a lawyer should be, and sometimes it's in this box, right? We have this box of an idea of what a lawyer is, and many lawyers even have that perception. So sometimes they'll see the work that we're doing and they're saying, I don't understand what's going on here. So one of those is things like medical advocacy or care advocacy. They say, well, that doesn't seem like a lawyer thing. Well, advocacy is what lawyers do. We solve problems. And so especially life care lawyers that do this kind of life care planning. But another example is sometimes the legal work is different and it's confusing. Even other lawyers will look at this, and I've had lawyers call me up and actually be angry to say, why would you set up their legal plan this way? Well, let me give you an example of a time that happened. We had a married couple, and one had severe dementia, severe Alzheimer's, and the other one was relatively healthy. And so what's the problem with traditional estate planning in that scenario? And the answer is, what if the healthy spouse dies? Because when the healthy spouse in that situation almost always is going to be what we'd call a caregiver spouse. The healthy spouse is bearing the weight of all the caregiving, or not all of it, but a lot of the caregiving, and certainly the stress and the worry and staying up at night and all those types of things. And the statistics tell us that the healthy spouse dies first most of the time. The caregiver spouse dies first most of the time. Now, an estate planning lawyer might not know that. As an elder law and a life care plan lawyer, we know that, and we need to plan for that. So a regular estate plan for a married couple, typically, what is it going to say? Well, obviously, it would say if one spouse dies, they've been married 50 years. If one spouse dies, everything goes to the other spouse. But our plan didn't do that. And so this lawyer called me up angry. Why would you do that? They've been married 50 years. Why are you disinheriting the spouse? Of course we wouldn't disinherit the spouse. We didn't do that. What we did is we set it up so that if the healthy spouse dies, everything was going to be set so that it was managed by the kids, not technically owned by the Alzheimer's spouse, but owned by a trust that the kids can manage that doesn't actually count against the spouse for things like Medicaid or things like other government benefits, so that we could get the care that he needs, get it paid for. And if the healthy spouse died and didn't have a plan like this, that everything just went to the nursing home spouse, the Alzheimer's spouse, then guess what? All of that we could have potentially lost all of that. We could have potentially lost all of the assets they had accumulated all their life because the healthy spouse died first. And people don't expect the healthy spouse to die first. And so when it happens so often that we've now come up with a plan, but other lawyers look at that and they said, this doesn't make any sense at all. We had it, everything in the healthy spouse's name and their trust, and it, set up a process to make sure that that was protected upon their death. So what happened is when the healthy spouse dies, all of those assets are protected. They're still available to spend on behalf of the Alzheimer's spouse, but they're not technically in the Alzheimer's spouse's name anymore. And under law, if we do it right, if we dot all our I's and cross all our T's and follow the process outlined in the law, we can make sure that that doesn't have to be spent down, or we don't lose the house, we don't lose the assets in order to qualify for help paying for that care, right? So that was a situation where good estate planning attorneys would call me up and challenge me, saying, Bob, I've heard you're a good attorney, but what the heck are you doing here? And the answer is, well, it was because in that specific case, we didn't want traditional estate planning. Traditional estate planning would actually have caused us a lot more problems than if we had done it that way. So that's just a quick example of sort of the distinction and the difference of what elder law is. So this is kind of an interesting thing. I saw this as I was preparing for today, and I like the graphic. This is done by the seniorliving.org website. And you see this graph, and on one side we have the cost, right? How much is this going to cost for care? And on the other side, you're going to have level of care and supervision. And you see as the different levels of care as we go up, the cost often goes up too. So we look at level of care, we look at cost, and we got everything from adult daycare, senior apartments, retirement communities, this thing called CCRC, which is a continuing care community, residential community, which sort of encompasses all the different levels of care. We got respite care, independent living, home care. We got home care, you see, kind of covers that whole spectrum too, because some people are able to have home care through all of their level of needs up until their death. Hospice care, nursing home care, but then we see where the cost comes in. You see, one of the highest cost things is going to be the CCRC, the continuing community residential care. You see also nursing home care here. So one of the things, this is not a graph that we use very often, but I thought it was helpful. One of the ones that we use is this. And this is a really important graph that we use. We called it the elder care continuum. And this is something that people in the life care area, the Life Care Lawyers Association, use this to kind of describe. So one of the big things that people know us for is helping them find funding to pay for that care, so they don't lose their house, they don't lose all their assets, they don't impoverish their spouse, particularly, right? So we got one spouse that's sick. Does that mean that the other spouse should be impoverished as a result of that? And some people, I'll honestly have conversations with people like that. I had a conversation with a judge in court on a hearing one time, and it wasn't a judge that usually deals with these types of issues. And they said, well, boy, I don't see the problem. Why can't we make the wife poor because the husband is sick? And I thought, oh my goodness, that seems so so out there for me, because I'm not usually having people say that. But one of the things that I've come to use as an example here is to say, okay, so what you're telling me is if a husband and wife, and the husband has heart problems, and because of their heart problems, that they need triple, quadruple bypass surgery, whatever it is, and then they need all the rehab associated with that, and they need, the surgery, the hospital, the follow-ups, all of those appointments. Who's going to pay for that? Who pays for heart surgery? Do you write a check for heart surgery? No, you don't write a check for heart surgery. Who pays for that? It's mostly going to be Medicare. Actually, the bulk of it is going to be Medicare that pays for it, and then your insurance is going to pay for it. Blue Cross, whatever your insurance is. And so you might have some copays. You might say, oh my gosh, I spent $10,000 on that heart surgery. Well, guess what it cost? It cost by the time all is said and done, $500,000, $600,000. Who paid the bulk of it? Medicare. Blue Cross paid a little bit. You paid a little bit. Who paid the bulk of it? Medicare. So we're perfectly fine saying that, no, the wife shouldn't be impoverished because the husband has heart disease, right? But what do we say if instead of heart disease, they have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or a stroke or something that requires continuing care, not a heart surgery, but continuing care? So 24-hour care might cost $100,000 a year, maybe $120,000, $150,000, depends on the circumstances, how we're getting that care. 24-hour a day care is very expensive, right? It's not covered by Medicare. It's not covered by Blue Cross. It's not covered by your insurance. So if you get one disease, we say, oh, We can't impoverish the spouse because they have heart disease, but we say, oh, but they have Alzheimer's. Okay, impoverish the spouse. No, that's not okay. This is not okay with me. And so unless we change the law, and if I were king of the world, I'd change a lot of these laws, but that's never going to happen. So bottom line is, what we do is we sort of even out the playing field and say, okay, of course we want the person that has heart disease to be taken care of and get the care that they need and the surgery they need. And of course we want them to access their Medicare and their insurance. But we also want the same thing for an Alzheimer's patient or a Parkinson's patient or a stroke patient, and make sure that their family is not going to lose everything because they happen to get Alzheimer's, or they happen to get Lewy body dementia, or they happen to get Parkinson's, or they happen to get one of these other diseases that it really doesn't cover. What we need isn't covered under Medicare, isn't covered under insurance. And so that's what these programs are at the bottom. So we talk about Medicare and Medicaid, family caregivers, Social Security, community services. Veterans benefits is something that we do a lot of. And of course, if we have the money and trying to, set that out. So one of the things that we always look at is, okay, well, where are we on the spectrum? So where are we on health and ability? And so, I call this the healthy, vigorous senior. The healthy, vigorous senior is no functional limits. Everything's fine. Looks like they might be getting a little older because they're a little hunched over there. But then we got some limited functioning. In other words, maybe we have some stability issues. Maybe we might be a fall risk. Maybe, we're pretty much okay. We're self-sufficient, but we've got some issues. Maybe we probably should be using a cane or a walker. Maybe even we have some memory issues. Okay, so maybe we're starting to forget things. So we're starting along that spectrum here. And then, it gets even more where, well, we also probably need help getting dressed. We need probably help getting up in the morning, get going, maybe showering. And then, it's a point where we need 24-hour care and even after death. And so we look at that spectrum, but often what we see is that we're way over here and we're still, let me see if I can draw. I don't think I can draw on here, but I gotta, let's see if I can figure this out. So we're over here, right? And guess what? I see all the time, we're still over here, right? We need significant help, and we're still living at home alone without any help. And so the idea, this is the danger zone, right? The fact that we're on this space in the spectrum, but we're all the way back here with living at home. Now, some people would say, okay, well, I want to be at this, if I ever get to this stage of the spectrum on the health and ability, I still want to be at home, but I want this, right? Well, that's perfectly fine. And a lot of times that can be arranged, and there's different programs down here on the bottom one that we can help use to make that happen and pay for it and things like that. But the truth is, even with home care, it's typically going to be somewhat limited. We're not going to have a nurse there, right? We're not going to have a skilled trade there. A skilled trade meaning a licensed nurse, a licensed caregiver that's licensed for like a nursing assistant or anything like that. Typically, the home assistance is going to be one person and family. So one person and your elderly spouse. And that's limiting as far as how good that care can ultimately be. Now, often this is where we're going to be, right? This is where we want to be, but we certainly have to look at these other options and make sure that we're not in this danger zone, that we're way off from what we need, our assistance that we need versus the assistance that we're getting. Okay. Of course, what do we see as we go along this line though? Cost a little bit more, a little bit more, really expensive, barrels full of cash, wheelbarrows full of cash here. And so that's, we're involved in all of this. We're involved in helping families figure out where are we on this spectrum, on the health and ability function. Where do we need to be on the where are we getting the care, what type of care, what the quality of care is, the amount of care, and then of course, how are we going to pay for it? Sometimes it's just helping them figure out that they actually have the resources. I've had this happen a number of times where the family said, oh, well, we can't afford that. I only have Social Security. Well, it turns out when we looked at their different accounts and looked at things like that, we say, okay, well, we've got plenty of money. It's just that there was this mindset that we can only spend what comes in every month. Well, people have the rainy day fund. Well, guess what? It was raining. That's what rainy day funds are for, is when we got problems, we got to be able to access those. But a lot of times we're also going to say, but we want to preserve that for the other spouse, or sometimes we want to preserve it just to make sure we have options and we continue to have options. And as long as it's legal, why wouldn't we try to do that, right? As long as we're following the law, why wouldn't we try to do that? And that's where this comes in, all of the different programs out here as far as trying to make sure and using a balance of that. So a lot of times, yes, of course, maybe we can have family caregivers, but if we're asking a family caregiver to take care of dad 24 hours a day for the next 5, 7, 8 years, that's nearly impossible for one person or a couple people to do that and not go crazy. And so the idea is to make sure that we can access respite care, that we can get them the assistance they need, especially if the family caregiver is the other elderly spouse. And we often do that so often. We have husband says, I've been married 50 years, she took care of me, I'm going to take care of her. But now we're counting on a 90-year-old man who's very capable of providing 24-hour care, what would normally be done by a team of 3 shifts of people. Or we're with the wife that says, I've cared for my husband all his life, I'm going to care for him, I'm the best one to care. Well, certainly you are the best person to care for him. But if we don't get you any help, guess what? That's why healthy spouses die first, because we're putting so much burden on one person. And so great, we're going to rely on family caregivers, but boy, shouldn't we get them some help? Shouldn't we get them? And maybe even that help is where they're not necessarily at home. Sometimes that's what we have to look at, especially if there's dementia or those types of things, to say, maybe we got to look at these other options. You're still going to be a caregiver. You're still going to go visit your spouse every day, or as often as you can, or whatever. I know that's difficult right now under current pandemic situations, but the bottom line is, that's kind of the spectrum. And so you probably maybe can see that this is actually a bit different than just, do I need a will or a trust, right? This is actually pretty detailed. And there are great options for all of this. I'm going to see if I can erase this now. I've not done this before, so we'll see if I'm, oops, now it's recording me. That was not what I intended it to do. Let's see. Savannah, do you know if you can get in here and help me with some of this? Stop the subtitles. Okay, I got that part. I'm not sure how to erase all of the lines now.
Okay. Yep, let me see what I can do for you here.
Oh,
Bob. No.
Okay, anyway, the bottom line is, one of the things that elder law incorporates, as I mentioned, like the test that we had to take to be a certified elder law attorney, there were things on there about age of discrimination in employment. There were things on there and things that we have to deal with, certainly elder abuse, resident, housing issues, taxes. One of the big things we're dealing with right now as an elder law attorney that I think we deal with quite a bit different than your typical estate planning is taxes, and making sure that we're minimizing taxes, because that's going to be very important, particularly on making sure that we're going to be able to have the resources. Am I able to turn this over to you there? Are you able to take control here or no?
So I can
okay,
chime in on the mic. Yep, you'd have to pass it over to me. So I'm only partially involved.
I see, never mind. We'll figure this out. Sorry guys, but we were just trying to make sure that we're not going to see all those yellow scribbly marks here. Erase all, okay, thank you. That wasn't that hard. Okay, thanks. And then how do I make it? There we go, let's do that. So bottom line is, elder law is actually a lot more than just estate planning. It's a lot more than tax law. It's a lot more than any of those other things. It really is trying to look at the person, trying to solve the problems. A lot of it, of course, is dealing with any sort of physical or cognitive issues that are created by our health and created by some form of illness or some form of genetic matter, and as far as different different special needs that people have, and making sure that we can deal with that. So it really means everybody, right? Because what we're doing is we're just making it much more specific to the person, rather than, you know, we're not just a stenographer of writing down your wishes. So I want I want this account divided 4 ways, and here's how I want it to go. Well, that's great. That's kind of the easy part. That's the easy part, to say, well, all right, well, we can write down that you want the account divided 4 ways, or the house is sold, and, you know, who's your executor. That's the easy part. It's not as easy as people think it is, because there's lots of things to make sure that we're complying with all the rules and complying with all the law. It is one of the things, I'll just give you one quick example before we get to any questions. If you happen to have a question, you might want to type it in now, because we're getting to the point where we're going to answer any questions. So if you have a question, feel free to type that in. But I'll give you one quick example as it relates to people thinking that just having documents is fine. So they went to, many of you have heard this thing called LegalZoom. So you can go to LegalZoom and you can get legal documents drafted, not by a lawyer, but by a computer program. And so I was looking at one of those earlier today, and the family is in a situation where we're going to need to qualify for Medicaid. And the person, the elderly person, the parent that needs to qualify for Medicaid, is not able to participate in making decisions or calling up their financial company. They would not be able to call up their financial company and say, okay, well, we need to cash this in or whatever. And so we looked at the power of attorney that was drafted by LegalZoom, and it said they can't cash in life insurance policies. Well, guess what we need to do in order to qualify for Medicaid? We're going to need to cash in a life insurance policy. And so it's just this little tiny life insurance policy. I think it's worth less than $3,000. And now what are we going to end up having to do because of that? You know, otherwise okay power of attorney that says we can't cash in life insurance policies. Now we're going to have to go to court. This is going to drag on for several months. We're going to have all kinds of problems because we're not going to be able to get Medicaid because of a $3,000 life insurance policy, but we have no way of cashing that in because the power of attorney was drafted as an estate planning power of attorney. It was drafted without the thought or idea of this specific person might need as it relates to some of these bigger issues. And so a lot of times the documents we draft look a bit different or a lot different than the documents you get, certainly from LegalZoom. I'm going to guarantee 100% of the time it's going to be different than what you get from LegalZoom. But even from other very highly qualified attorneys, because they're dealing with a different aspect of the law, pretty much what happens when you die, right? So that is one of those things. And so often people will come to us with perfectly well drafted estate planning documents, and we're still going to recommend some updates and some changes to make it so that we're going to be able to, the family is going to be able to do what needs to be done if in fact they do get dementia or do get a stroke or do get you know, some kind of dreaded disease. That often the regular estate planning documents are not, even well drafted ones by very qualified attorneys are not going to have the language in there that we need. And if we don't have it, we're going to have to go to court and hope that the judge is going to allow us to do what needs to be done for the family. So Savannah, are there any questions? Has there been any questions posted here today?
Hi, Bob. So I do not see any questions at this time.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and let you take over here, and we're going to give you some instructions about if you feel like any of the things that we talked about are things that someone in your family or perhaps you need to be aware of or need assistance on, please feel free to get a hold of us, and Savannah's going to tell you the best way to do that. And also, if you know people, it may not even be a family member, but it's a neighbor, it's somebody else that you know, certainly pass this along and send them our way, because we'd love to help. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. As Bob mentioned, we have a really easy way for you to get started working with our team. In a few minutes, you're going to get an email. It's going to come right to your email inbox, and it's going to have a button that you'll click that will take you to a calendar. This calendar will allow you to choose a day and time that's convenient for you for a member of our team to give you a call. This complimentary call, there's absolutely no risk to this call, but this complimentary call will take about 15 minutes, and you'll be able to ask us questions about our firm. We'll ask you questions about your concerns, about your situation, and you'll be able to decide if our firm is really the best fit for your needs. If you decide that you would like to move forward with letting us help you with your legal planning, then during that call, you'll also be able to schedule an appointment with an attorney. So again, that email is going to be coming to you within the next few minutes. You'll be able to click, open a calendar, choose a day and time that works for you. Our team will give you a call, and we'll just take it from there. If you're watching in the future, if you're watching the replay of today's webinar, then you can always give us a call at 810-694-9000. And you can also email info@manorlaw.com. Thanks again to everyone for joining us today, and stay tuned for tomorrow's invite or tomorrow's replay and your next invite to next week's webinar Wednesday. Thank you.